All right, looks like we're live. Jeannie, we good to go?
We're good to go. Thank you, sir.
All right, we are recording now. So today is November 30th, Tuesday, 2021. It's noon. This is the first meeting of the Council on Sexual Misconduct Climate Assessments. And while we start, I'd like to just hand it over for a moment to my co-chair, Senator Slapp, with any remarks.
Thank you, Representative Elliott. And I want to just thank the advocates and especially the students who have made this possible and helped to create what we know is going to help address a real crisis on our college campuses across the nation and here in Connecticut. At least 1/4 of women undergraduates, female undergraduates report being raped or sexually assaulted in their time at school. And we know that just a fraction of them are actually reported, just about 20%. So we know there's a big issue. And I think that the work of you all on the council and again, the students to make this possible is really inspiring, and I'm ready to get to work and find solutions. I think the survey and the different parts of the legislation are really going to be key to helping us get to a better place. So thank you again, and I'm ready to work with all of you and get us to a better place.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to move on now to introductions. If we would, I will just call people one-on-one to make this go nice and smoothly and in no particular order. Hilary, would you like to start off?
Hi, thank you for having me. I just want to briefly introduce myself and get to know the rest of you as we do this work. My name is Hilary Haldane. I'm a professor here at Quinnipiac University, and my background over the last nearly 30 years has been as both NGO practice work. So I've done that side of the work in gender-based violence, and also 25 years of research in the gender-based violence field. So it's wonderful to join all of you. And again, thank you to the students for being the leads in this.
Thank you, Hilary. Next, Allie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allie. This is so exciting. So I'm so happy to be here with everyone. I'm the founder and policy director of Every Voice Coalition Connecticut, which is a group of students who helped push for this bill. We have 3 other student reps. Being a student means mediating Zooms and classes. So I think one's hoping to join, but the other 2 can't make it today. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Allie. Next, Kara.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here as well. My name is Kara Mackler. I'm the Director of Campus Services at the Center for Empowerment and Education. We're a member agency of the Alliance to End Sexual Violence and Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
Thank you, Kara. Next, we'll move on to Kristen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Esch. I work at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield. I am the project coordinator for the Office on Violence Against Women grant. So I do prevention work, education, things like that.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Next, move on to Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Gilliberto. I'm an attorney with the Victim Rights Center. I'm also a program of the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence. We are a nonprofit that gives free legal representation to victims of sexual assault and stalking. Part of that work entails representing victims in Title IX hearings before colleges and universities. I'm very excited to be a part of this council and look forward to working with all of you.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Next, we'll have Bridget.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Bridget Kessner, and I'm the Education and Youth Services Coordinator with the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence. We are a statewide coalition of sexual violence prevention and intervention centers. We provide services to survivors statewide, including those on college and university campuses in the state. In my position, I work very closely providing assistance to our campus advocates and child advocates in their prevention and response efforts. Additionally, I'm involved in our policy efforts to all things higher ed. So I am so happy to see all of the hard work of folks in this room and others come to fruition in this way. And I'm really eager to work with all of you.
Great, thank you, Bridget. Next, we'll move on to Louisa.
I am Louise Prunz. I'm the Community Education and Prevention Coordinator at Safe Haven of Greater Waterbury. I'm also an MFT. I do prevention and education work in the school systems from pre-K to college, do a lot of workshops, and I'm actually in middle school now taking a lunch break so I can attend this.
Thank you, Louisa. Next, we'll go to Colleen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colleen Carney. I'm the project director with the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities here to help represent the community colleges. Also been a project director for OVW grant. So Office on Violence Against Women, and working a lot with CSU with prevention work, bystander intervention, and a lot of things, like that. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Colleen. Edith, would you like to go next?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edith Alvarado. I'm from the Department of Public Health. I'm the program coordinator of the Sexual Violence Prevention Program. I've previously done great work with the Alliance and the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Thank you so much for having me today, and I look forward to doing this work with everyone. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Edith. Next, we'll move on to Deborah.
Couldn't find the mute, sorry. I'm Debbie Calucci. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Equity and Inclusion and Title IX Coordinator at Wesleyan University. And in my role, I work with not only all of our policy and procedure prevention and response around sexual misconduct, faculty, staff, and students. I also work with in bias and discriminatory harassment and affirmative action.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. Move on to Lily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lily Svensson. I'm the director of the Office of Institutional Research at Yale. As part of my work, I also sit on the university Title IX steering committee to advise on various aspects of assessing and measuring campus climate. I was involved in the design of the 2015 and 2019 AAU campus sexual misconduct and gender climate surveys. And I also took the lead in running those projects on our campus.
Great, thank you, Lily. Stacy, why don't you go next?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacey Miller. I'm the Vice President for Equity and Inclusion and also the Title IX Coordinator at Central Connecticut State University. My office oversees several other offices, the Women's Center, the LGBTQA Center, as well as the Office of Victims Advocacy and Violence Prevention. And so I do a lot of work on campus programmatically to address sexual misconduct, through training and development, but we also do a lot of the compliance work out of my office as well. And it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. And lastly, Sarah, go right ahead.
Hi, are we just introducing ourselves, like who we are? Okay, so hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a senior at Yale. I'm double majoring in film and anthropology. I worked with Allie with Every Voice the past year to help get the bill passed, and that's a little about me.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, while I am the chair of the Higher Education Committee and chairing this meeting, I would like to propose a motion that Bridget be the permanent chair. Could we have someone make that motion?
I'll motion for Bridget to be the permanent chair of the council.
Can we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, and any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'd like to move to a vote, and I think a simple voice vote will be fine. All those who agree say aye.
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 Any opposed? No one is opposed, and I now hand over the reins to Bridget. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Representative Elliott, and thank you all for your nominations and votes. It's very much appreciated, and I'm really, really eager to dive into this work with all of you. We really have an incredible group of professionals here, and I think we are well equipped for the tasks at hand. So I would like to review the legislation. We do have the text that enables the council and outlines our responsibilities, the duties that we have. I will put that, it doesn't look as if I have access to a chat. However, it is available on the CGA website, and hopefully some of you do have that up and had a chance to review preceding today's meeting. So just looking at what is outlined, we sort of have three particular duties that are broken down into smaller parts. But it looks like we will really need to be first developing a list of data points that will be collected by the institutions through student responses related to sexual misconduct. It also outlines the data points that shall be included, but we're not limited to. And then we will be recommending one or more sexual misconduct climate assessments that collect the data points that are identified by the council. And then lastly, we will be recommending guidelines for the implementation of these assessments. So all of that being said, I would really like to discuss as a council what methods you all see as best to begin to address these three duties, as well as the timeline that may be necessary for doing so. I do recognize that we are convening a bit later than originally anticipated. So I want to look at what our timeline may be so that we can hopefully find a deadline that'll work for us, as well as discuss how we can begin to construct this work. So if anybody would like to start with weighing in, that would be much appreciated. Any thoughts about the initial steps for developing the list of data points, perhaps? Yeah, Stacy, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, everyone. CCSU recently participated in 2 different climate surveys, same provider, but we did them back-to-back years. We did one in 2019 and one in 2020. Within that climate survey, which was conducted by HERI, which stands for the Higher Education Research Institute, which is out of UCLA. It's a national benchmarkable climate survey, and within that survey, they have a number of questions specific to sexual misconduct or non-consensual sexual activity. And so, that's a suggested possible starting point for us. I think there's 10 to 15 questions related specifically, again, to this particular topic. Because it's a national survey, it's benchmarkable. HERI is very well known within higher education, and they're incredibly affordable. And so I was wondering maybe if it would be of benefit to us to maybe talk to them directly, explore the possibility of maybe using those particular questions within that survey to possibly do something centrally for the state. So that's a suggestion. Again, I'm sure other folks have other ideas, but that might be a starting point for us.
Deborah.
I also like the idea, thank you, Stacy, of not, trying to start with a blank slate, right? And coming up with questions just off the top of our head. So I am also familiar with HERI, and also within CICC, the independent colleges in Connecticut, Jennifer has mentioned that Massachusetts is also working on this, and that they may be a little bit further ahead of us in terms of developing questions for data points. Those haven't really been released yet, but that might also be another resource for us to look at. Like I said, I agree with Stacy that if we can get some sample questions that we can all then weigh in on in terms of what works best on each of our campuses, that might help speed up our process.
Thank you. I saw Ali first.
Yeah, Deborah, I think that's a great point. I'm fortunate I've sat in on the Massachusetts one, so I know more a little bit about what they're at. I think when they were starting out with needing to consolidate a list of data points, they looked at what they considered model surveys. So AAU, as Stacy mentioned, I think it's HARP could be one of those. I think they used ARC3. So they consolidated a list of like good data points from surveys and then sent it to participants to vote on and then vote on expansions for. So a lot of it happened even asynchronously between meetings, which we could do if we're short on time, is to look at those model surveys, extrapolate what feels right, and then think about what additions we might want to recommend that aren't found in those surveys.
Thank you. Colleen?
Thanks, Bridget. Just to add to what Allie mentioned, I spoke with, I believe her name's Amanda Robbins, who's the campus safety advisor out of Massachusetts. And she shared, Allie, you probably heard this, that I think their questions will be released this month, by the end of the month, I believe. I know they have a deadline as well. So that's all public on their website. They have a website that's dedicated to the implementation of the law in Connecticut, or in Massachusetts. So if we do want to take a look at those questions, that will be public and we'll be able to see those pretty soon in case it's helpful to us.
Thank you, Colleen. Next, I saw Lily.
Thanks. I have a point of clarification. So it sounds like we're talking about maybe a couple of different things. So it sounds like our committee has been charged to identify both the kind of topics that we want to specify be measured in an ongoing way on campuses, and also provide back to campuses not only that list of topics, but some set of resources through which those campuses could gather information on those topics. I really like the idea that it seems to be coalescing about kind of pulling together however many existing survey instruments there are, and kind of reading through those. And it sounds to me like we would be reading through those to really pull out topics rather than necessarily the wording of individual questions. But I just wanted to check and see if that was the understanding of other folks here on the call, because that's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that is my understanding. I know that initially, as the law was going through, that we were talking about, and before Wesley and I worked at Manchester Community College in a similar role, and just the communities and the culture and the populations on our different campuses make it really difficult to have a standard question versus the information that we're trying to gather. So I understand it the same way, Lily. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I also think the role of guidance is, if there's something that we want to at least put on universities' radar in terms of model language or delicate language around something, I think that's where the guidances could come in, where it's more of a recommendation than specifying specific language.
Kristen, I saw your hand up.
Forgot to unmute. Another tool I thought of, Rutgers back in 2014 was tasked by the White House to create these a climate survey as kind of a pilot campus. And so they have continued, I'm not sure if it's every year, but their tool is also available online and has been updated since using research and whatnot. So that could be a good tool as well.
Next was Stacy.
Thanks. I just wanted to maybe push back a little bit and advocate for something that actually could be used statewide, because I think that having something that's benchmarkable between our campuses would actually be really helpful in figuring out the efficacy of our work on our different campuses. I mean, it's fine to benchmark against yourself, But it's also good to see where you fall out amongst your peers or other institutions. And so I would like to advocate for a tool that, and I understand we are different campuses, different populations, different groups on each of those campuses. But I think if we can come up with a good, solid group of questions that we can use throughout our campuses, that would actually be really helpful to all of us doing this work, because we'd be able to see how we're faring, not only with ourselves, but also within our peer group. So that's just my little pushback plug.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Stacy. I think that's a great recommendation. There could always be a section of the assessment that is the kind of more standardized, and then another section that is more unique to the populations at each university or campus, so that both of those kind of problems being presented by the council are kind of solved there.
Next up, I saw Hilary.
Yeah, I wanted to actually just echo what both Kara and Stacy said. I did want to ask if we were not inclined to have what would be our common data set. I thought that was going to be a critical part of research design, would be to have. I mean, it can be as minimal, we can make it as minimal as possible, which is why it would be really great to see the Massachusetts questions. I think that would be wonderful. And I would encourage us to think about that. But I did think it was going to be a combination of both, potentially, you know, a set of questions that were going to be common for all, and then the flexibility for various institutions to do what they needed to attend to their own local culture. And that was just kind of my response to that. But the question I had that was also more of an archive question: are we going to be establishing like a repository, you know, a shared repository? Because there are actually, not just in addition to looking at the other instruments that are out there, there are some very good publications on overviews of those instruments where they compare and contrast. So I'm just wondering if that, you know, I'm just thinking about the archive that we can all have access to in order to kind of expedite that process too.
I saw some head nods, and I think that would be a great direction. I saw Lily's hand is up as well.
Yeah, I second the idea of having a shared document repository for this group as we continue. I think there's going to be a lot of information that we'll all be reviewing. And so that will be really helpful to stay organized and up to speed. I think that the phrase that Hilary used is a really interesting one, of a common data set. There are actually multiple ways that we could think about a future state of a common, something called a common data set. One way is to think about one row per survey response. Another way is actually something quite different, that is actually similar to something that exists right now in the institutional research landscape, which is called the common data set. And that's a mechanism through which very, very disparate institutions are given a framework and a set of generalized definitions for different metrics. And each individual institution shares in the way that they would most sensibly and most suitably for their community operationalize that metric. But we share in kind of the aggregated answers to different measures and different topics. And cumulatively, it's an enormously rich body of comparative information, but sidesteps a number of the challenges that I think are being raised even already early into this discussion about what it would mean for everyone to ask literally the exact same question on a survey, given how disparate our communities are, how disparate our practices and definitions are. So I think there's something there that I'm really interested in hearing more from other folks on this group about. And I wonder if kind of as one of our next steps, it would make sense to kind of gather those open source survey instruments that already exist, and for all of us to read through them and then if we have time to convene again, to talk through them, and maybe not just for the purpose of pulling out topics that we all think are sort of important baseline information for campus assessments to gather. But also if there are points along the way when folks gathered on the Zoom screen here can kind of help the rest of the folks on the committee understand where different examples of wording are actually meeting different needs for our various communities, and to try to surface where some of that heterogeneity across instruments might actually be really beneficial, and where we are seeing a place where even a more tightly constrained wording might be something that would be useful across our campuses. So I wanted to kind of raise that as an idea.
The short answer is I really like that idea, Lily. Thank you.
Yes, I definitely appreciate the steps you outlined as well. Does anybody else have any feedback?
Hi, everyone. I just had a really quick question pertaining to the Harry survey that Stacy mentioned. Do you know if is this an annual survey? Is this a survey given every couple of years? I guess I was thinking about how often these questions would be presented to each campus and school.
I can answer that quickly. Basically, the way the UCLA Harry survey works is that you can implement it as many times as you want. You can implement it annually, biannually, triannual, whatever you want to do. They don't really, they put no restrictions on it. The survey, the cost of the survey is based on the number of the population of your campus. And if you all want, I can actually share the questions. Like I can literally show you a screenshot of some of the questions that they ask in that particular section. So would people be okay with me sharing that screen? And I can get these questions to whomever. I guess I can give them to you, Bridget. I don't know if you're the person who's going to be compiling all the different sources, but I'll show you the questions now. So here are this is the section called unwanted sexual contact. And you can see the questions that are asked. So since you entered this college, which again is universal, right? Have you been subjected to any unwanted? And then they give you the categories there. There's 16 questions in total, by the way. How long was the most recent occurrence of unwanted sexual contact? Did this person threaten to use physical force? And some of these have branching logic. So you're seeing some of the questions, but maybe depending on how you answer it, it may skip a question. So just be aware of that. Were you dating or in an intimate relationship with the person? Does the person have an affiliation with the institution? Whom have you told? Again, this list could be expanded based on your campus. There may be other offices or other areas that, or areas that don't apply. Like if it's a community college, obviously residence hall staff would not apply, but there may be other offices that this person could go to. Did you report or file a formal complaint with the institution? Again, this category could be expanded on. How satisfied were you with the institutional response? And then there's a few more questions specific to sexual assault. Since you entered this college, has someone sexually assaulted or attempted to sexually assault you? How long ago was the most recent occurrence? Did the sexual assault occur at the time when you were unable to provide consent? Did this person use or threaten physical force? Were you dating or in an intimate relationship with this person? There's a few more. Does this person have an affiliation with the institution? And then I think the last question, or the last two questions, are whom have you told? And did you report or file a complaint? And then how satisfied were you with the institutional response? And then it goes on to another section. So what you're seeing is the entire survey, but I only showed you the portion of the survey that's specific to unwanted sexual contact, and sexual assault. So I will send this, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I will send this to Bridget as another possible. And again, this is a part of a larger tool, and I don't even know if Harry would allow us to use these questions. I'm not even sure at this point. I'm just literally throwing, as they say, spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks. So, and I know there are other tools out there. Some are more affordable, some are less affordable, some are free. I'd love to see the one from Massachusetts, of course. And to Lily's point, right? How do we, if you look at the way the questions are constructed, there's probably some themes there or some categories that we could pull from. And then obviously we need to somehow customize, even if we were going to use a common set of questions, we'd probably still need to have some customized questions per campus. So just throwing that out there. Thanks.
Thank you very much for all that information, Stacy. Lily, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, Stacy, thank you for sharing that. I wanted to add that I'm happy to provide a copy of the AAU WestStat instrument that's open source, that's available on our website, but I'll pull that out and Bridget, send it over to you as you're compiling example instruments.
Great. Was there any other feedback before we just review an outline of those next steps?
I just want to add that I really like, Stacy, how clean those questions were. Working with kids and youth, the answers are very straightforward. There's no blurring of the lines anywhere. And I liked how concise they were. And I think it'll be easier for students to answer those than ones that have more information on there. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Lisa?
Yes, I'm just wondering if any of the colleges that are represented here on this council, if they've ever done themselves voluntarily some form of sexual misconduct climate assessment, and what was, what did you find? How did you get people to answer? Did people answer? And I'd just be curious, from trial and error, your experiences with that.
Do you want to go first, Deb?
I was just trying to raise my hand. We do at Wesleyan. What we ended up doing after the 2015 campus climate surveys is started our own internal overall climate and culture survey with lots of different kinds of questions. And there's a sexual misconduct section. And we implemented it with faculty, staff, and students, the same instrument, so that we could kind of see, like, do staff feel sexually harassed at a different, and we could also break it down by race and gender identity and lots of things. So we've been doing that on our campus. And then, very interested in working with this group to expand and share statewide kind of data points and information. But that's kind of how we've been doing it, to answer your question. And again, it was trial and error. And the most recent one, which was pre-pandemic, because we decided that, in a pandemic, asking people about is the culture, welcoming and accepting, seems kind of weird. So, because the culture's not fine for anyone on a college campus right now. So just that being said, we decided to delay it. And given this new legislation, we've now decided to move forward and separate them. And we're going to be doing a comprehensive faculty and staff survey in a different way, and then working with this on students. But our return rates have been very good, over 67% for faculty, staff, and students. So.
Here at Sacred Heart, we did one in 2016. We had one for students, one for faculty, staff. We used two tools to kind of create our own. We learned a lot from it. We used SurveyMonkey, which there were some struggles there just because we had some limitations in what we could skip. And so our students got a little frustrated because there were certain questions we couldn't skip. And so there were some struggles there. I don't remember our percentage of students who took it. It wasn't particularly high from what I recall. So I think that will be a bit of a struggle, is trying to figure out how to best incentivize these students once we get there. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But yeah, we haven't done one specifically related to this since then.
No, thank you for that feedback, Kristen. And I think it's important that we do all consider that, recommendations regarding implementation are also one of our duties here. So it's something that I think we need to keep in the back of our minds as we will be providing that information along with everything else we've been discussing. Next, I saw Allie's hand.
Yeah, this was like way back before that incredible question, but I was just going to say, and it's going to sound like I'm so biased. I go to Brandeis University and we do a survey every few years, and Massachusetts is looking at ours as one of those model surveys. So I was just going to say that I'm also going to send that to Bridget. We can take or leave it because Connecticut Pride, but it has some cool questions that we might consider for, guidances, recommendations, or that unique section per college campus.
Thanks, Allie. Next, I saw Stacy.
Hello again. I wanted to make a comment and then ask Lily a question about the AAU survey. So my comment is, I'm not pushing any particular survey. I want to make that clear. I'm just knowledgeable about the Harry survey, which is why I've kind of pushed it forward. But I'm less interested in which we use, but that we all use something that's consistent. Again, I understand there's differences between our campuses. I am a community college graduate. Also went to, big private, big publics. I've worked at small privates. I know the differences between institutions and the nuances. So I think there certainly should be some nuance to whatever survey we decide to go with or develop. But I hope that we can, kind of like Lily said earlier, I hope we can create a common data set of some kind so that we're able to at least do some comparison, even if it's not we're not necessarily comparing ourselves against everybody in the state, but people like ourselves. So for the state institutions, we would compare, CCSU could compare itself to Southern or Eastern or Western, and the privates could compare themselves to each other, just so that, or the community colleges can compare themselves to each other. I think as long as there's some way for us to be able to do some of that data extraction and try to figure out where we kind of land and how well we're doing, not only internally, but externally, I think would be really helpful. And then my question to Lily was, you said that the AAU one was open source. What does that mean? Does that mean that it's free, or does that mean that we can all see the questions before we potentially decide we want to purchase it, or what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So by open source, I meant the questions are out in the public domain. You can use the whole survey, you can use part of the survey, you can adapt it, you can plug it into SurveyMonkey if that's the tool that you like to use. You can use Qualtrics or program your own thing. I know some institutions nationally have taken the questions and didn't participate in the AAU survey with AAU institutions. Instead, they plugged most of the survey into Qualtrics and even adapted some of the skip logic and adapted, some of the individual question logic to their local needs. But the questions are just out there. And
you don't have to pay for them?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, they're just.
And how many are there in their survey? If you were to do the complete survey, how many are we talking about?
So the number of questions varies in terms of depending on what types of experiences you've had.
So there's branching logic, basically.
There's a lot of branching logic.
Okay.
And so I think that's a place where, especially once we've all had a chance to look at different examples of instruments and think about what a comprehensive picture really takes in terms of the number of questions that would be asked. That's something that I'm really interested to hear kind of more perspectives among this group, because the length of a survey taking experience has tended to be the most for individuals who have experienced different forms of sexual misconduct. And that has a negative impact, I think, on folks who are already bringing in those experiences and then sharing some very vulnerable information in the course of taking a survey. So that's something to keep in mind. I think for us at Yale, kind of going back to Lisa's great question about, what is it like to run one of these surveys, and how has that kind of played out, and how has that been successful or more or less successful? At Yale, a couple of things that I wanted to share that really inform my experience in thinking about future survey assessments. One is that it has been very important for the questions that we ask on our campus to be very well aligned with the definitions that we use about sexual misconduct for our students. We found in 2015, the first time we had run one of these massive campus-wide, or for all students, I should clarify, campus climate assessments, that the language we were using in the survey as we were asking questions, that's what I think of as the survey instruments, the questions that you're asking, the way those were worded were themselves a pedagogical tool. And we heard from a number of students who had taken the survey, when their reaction to taking the survey was, I didn't realize that counted. And so when we reflect on the language that we're using, I think one of the design features that we're going to really try to carry forward is the use of very descriptive language. That tends to make a prompt longer. So that's something that, I think we should think through, and that'll be apparent when you start looking through the AAU and WestEd instrument. The questions are themselves longer because they're describing the full definition of kind of what we mean. But then that actually had, just even the process of taking that survey had a positive effect for students, where we actually saw increases in students seeking support for experiences that they responded about the survey on. I also found that it was really important for us, as we have run these surveys twice now, to be able to speak very clearly with students across our different schools, and we have 14 different schools, so students are coming from very different places, but to be able to speak with students in each school about how the data will be used and how we used the data the last time we collected it, that is a really important part of how we think about these survey instruments, is not only the collection, but also the use, because running a survey is not our goal, right? That's not the goal. So we want to make sure that we're actually really working toward the ends that we really have in mind, and a survey is one mechanism to get there.
Thank you so much, Lily, and for everybody else who's been contributing through this conversation. So just to conclude this agenda item and kind of review our plan moving forward before we set a timeline for it, if anybody who is interested, I know Stacy, Lily, and Allie have all shared some interest, but anyone else as well, if you would like to share with me any open source instruments that you can email them directly to me. My email address is bridget@endsexualviolencect.org. Again, that's Bridget, BRIDGET, @endsexualviolencect.org. You can also, of course, find it on the invitation for this meeting. So if you would like to send me any instruments that were mentioned or anything else that you think of, that would definitely be helpful. So from there, I can, yes.
Would you mind putting, I don't see a chat in here.
I don't either. I was going to send a link earlier
okay.
to the
All right.
legislation.
But you said it was Bridget dot or Bridget end?
Bridget at.
Bridget at.
Yep.
End sexual violence dot.
CT.org.
Okay, I had the at in the wrong place. Thank you.
Not a problem. So from there, I will distribute those instruments for everyone's review. And then perhaps once everyone's had a chance to read through, we can talk through, everything that we have pulled out as potentially important baseline topics and move forward from there. I think as we are reviewing, I also want to just remind everybody to review the statute. I'll include that as well in the information that I'll be distributing, just because there is some information in statute that we need to include. So I'll be sure to include that as well so that we can keep that in mind moving forward. Also, as I know Kristen touched on, and I want to mention as well, we really do want to also be considering what this implementation should look like, because that'll be our next step. So looking at that timeline, there is the date of January 1st of 2022 to be providing some information, from this committee. So as a council, I just wanted to check in and see what everybody's timeline looks like here, how much time you would potentially need to review content. And then, collect your ideas before we meet again. If it would be viable for us to be able to meet perhaps in 2 weeks, or if that is not enough time, whatever feedback you have regarding this would be helpful.
Personally for me, the timing is good for us just because we're about to enter finals and then they go away for a little while, so it calms down a bit. So I know 2 weeks would probably be fine for me, obviously depending on if there's a lot of tools we want to look at, but based on what was shared here, I think that would be fine personally.
Yeah, and I would base that off of those 3 tools as well as review of the statute. Keeping in mind as well that, if we go into the following week, we're coming up against, those of you, I'm sure many people are going to be off that final week of the month for the holidays. Stacy?
I just need clarity. What are we submitting on January 1st? Just like preliminary ideas? And who are we providing those ideas to? Is it our state folks, our senators and representatives, or is it a different group?
So that's a great question. According to the statutes, we will be submitting the list of data points that we've developed and recommended climate assessments and guidelines for implementation. So we're really looking at gathering all the necessary information in that time frame, which is a short time frame, which is why I wanted to check in with folks. I do intend to touch base with Representative Elliott and Senator Slab to see what exactly will be needed and how we can move forward in a short time frame. However, given our conversation today, does it at least look as if we can send over any instruments you have to me in the next day or two, and then from there I can send it out to everybody for review by the end of next week. I do see 2 hands. I see Hilary and then Lily. So if you'd like to respond in that order, feel free.
Oh, I had my hand up from something prior, so I'll wait till the very end because it was a prior issue.
Sure. Lily?
I guess I'm wondering if there's any way that we can have a little bit of an extension past January 1, because I think there are all kinds of things on various plates as we come into the end of the year, and I worry about not having enough time for the group to deliberate. thoughtfully about the kind of multiple components of what we'll be delivering. It started to feel to me as we've been discussing that there are sort of chapters of how we might deliberate, sort of thinking about the topics and getting more texture on what the advised sort of topics are that individual institutions should be measuring. And then it starts to feel to me like a separate and very rich conversation about implementation guidelines with very different sort of background references and experiences that we could all share. And that doesn't feel like we could fit it between now and the winter holiday recesses that we all have. So, and Representative Elliott, do you have some?
I don't have any sort of incredible insight. On the one hand, it is written in statute. On the other hand, if it's not ready, it's not ready. Derek, Kevin, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I guess I would ask, I hate to answer a question with a question, but that's what I'm going to do. So maybe if we think together as a group here, what the duration of time we do need, because the most important thing is providing a good product. And I think that if you look at the January date, it's there in part because I think just the timing of our legislative session, which is about a month later. And so that's part of the reason they want the council work to, at least hitting some benchmarks prior to when we go in. But anyway, so I don't know if you have some insight, Bridget and others, about how long we think we need in order to come up with, with the product.
Yeah, I agree and echo all the concerns expressed and appreciate, both of your feedback. Does anybody have a comment regarding I know there's a few hands up, but does anybody have a comment regarding their, insight into the necessary timeline?
I just have a quick comment, and that is whatever, I'm pretty open at this point to when we meet next. But whatever meeting, whenever we meet again, it needs to be a longer meeting, obviously. And that's, I don't know if it needs to be in person or if it needs to be remote, but we need at least 2 to 3 hours if we're going to try to hash through some of this stuff. So that's my only recommendation or thought. Thanks.
Thank you. I see Senator Witkos.
Thanks, Bridget. I was going to echo my co-chairs and state that if the report's not done, it's not done. But, we're going back in February 9th. So I'd like to have a product before our drafting deadline. That's like maybe a week later. So, I mean, that would be the drop dead extension. I don't know if that gives folks, another month to be able to deliberate and give us a product, but at least something that we can look at to get an idea of any trends or anything that may have to be adjusted legislatively.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I see Deborah.
Sorry, I was trying to now put my hand down because that was answered. And yes, I would support kind of looking at it just a little bit longer. I agree completely with Stacy that once we get the information and then we have to try and figure out what we each think is best next and then work together, which is great, to figure out what we supply. That for those of us who work on campuses, we are running up against that time where, and I don't know how anybody else's campus is, but for us, because there haven't been raises in a while, we've been given some time off, and so kind of not working until January 4th, which is past the deadline. So once we get the students gone, I'm happy to work on my break, but I also want to be sensitive to the fact that is happening. So I would agree. Even if we could push it from January 1st to the middle of January to give us an extra bulk of time. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, is that happy to meet again in 2 weeks, right? To start unpacking what it is we have at that point in time. I think that timeline works well.
Thank you. I see a couple more hands up. I do want to keep an eye on the time, given that we only have 3 or 4 minutes. But if Allie, you could start quickly, followed by Hilary and then Kara, and then we'll perhaps have to make a motion to adjourn.
I was just going to quickly say, and I wasn't fast enough about pulling it up, but the enabling legislation that Jeannie sent is just like that January 1st, 2022 deadline for us. There is another date that's in the bill about the first time that I think universities have to administer a climate survey from us if they haven't already in the interim. I would say, like, based on like my recollection, I don't think extending January 1st to February would impede on that ability for universities. So I do think like keeping up with the timeline, there's enough of a like wiggle room to like have these cognizant discussions and still be on track to get the survey out in time.
Thanks, Allie. Hilary?
Yeah, my question was just clarity, and this can be for our next meeting, but just to make sure it's on the agenda, is clarity of product, what that's meant, because I'm in agreement with Lily about it. Sounds like where we are settling, and this is to Stacy's point, is we want a domain in common, like we clearly want a domain, and yet we then want the flexibility beyond that for elsewhere. So it's like that domain that we agree on as a group. Is that what we're talking about? That would be the product. I just want clarity on that. And that was just the question I had. Thank you.
Sure. Kara?
Really quick, I was just going to echo that I think the timeline, if we meet the week of the 13th, if we had a longer block of time, I think given how productive this conversation was today, I have faith that we can probably produce a lot, in that week if we have the instruments shared within the next couple of days. That, at least for my timeline, I think that would be good.
Great.
Can we meet in person? Are people opposed to that? People opposed to this?
I second that.
Excuse me,
Stacy.
this
We
is
meet in
a
person.
legislative council, so everything has to be open to the public. And we're not really meeting in person because of the virus. We're meeting virtually.
Okay.
And doing everything online.
Thank you very much, Jeannie. All right. Lily, and then I'm just going to summarize and we'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thanks. I'm glad that we'll be meeting remotely. I think that way we'll actually have more ability as well to view things sort of in soft copy as we talk, which will be helpful. I wanted to raise a suggestion that kind of as we come into a January 1 deadline, we consider supplying kind of updated or partial guidance to the extent that we have it to meet the desire for some product, especially as the legislative session begins, even if we can't have kind of a full package ready by that point, depending on what time the group needs.
Great. Thank you, Lily. That was a consideration I had as well. So I think that that's potentially a really good plan. So as discussed, if anybody does have a tool that they want to send over, please get that over to me. I have all of your names on our list, so I will be distributing all of that information to ensure you have a chance to review. I will also set up a meeting for 2 weeks from now so that we can, at the very least, check in and perhaps at that point, we can designate a concrete timeline for this project based on what we've reviewed. Does that sound good to everybody? Nods, shaking head. Good. Okay. Lovely. So with that being 1 o'clock, if somebody would like to make a motion to adjourn, that would be great. And I will be in touch.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you all very much.